Hey guys, Doug the Gamer Dad here. This may look familiar to you if you've been around for a couple of my videos. This is my Pentium 4 setup that I played around with a couple of videos ago. This has the Cedar Mill version of the Pentium 4 mounted on it that natively runs at 3 gigahertz. My last video, I was really interested to know, can that just run at 4 gigahertz? Because there was supposed to be like a Pentium 4 Extreme Edition launching with 4 gigahertz, and that just never launched. And I was curious if the final versions of the Pentium 4 were able to do that. And so I just casually set it up, and we hit 4 gigahertz without doing anything but changing the bus speed. Some people in the comments wanted to know why I didn't do any stability testing. And to that I say, well, I wasn't really trying. I just kind of wanted to know if 4 gigahertz was a possibility for Pentium 4. But if you want me to try, then I guess we're going to have to go a little bit deeper, huh? Now, my last video, we played around with a Pentium 4 model 631. And I talked about how that was 3 gigahertz and how there was also a 641, a 651, a 661. The fastest one they made was the 661, and that ran at 3.6 gigahertz. That's the fastest Cedar Mill chip. I wasn't able to source one of those, but I was able to source a Pentium 4 651, so this one natively runs at 3.4 gigahertz. But that's not what's important about this chip that's in my hand. We're going to have a short discussion about date codes. Sorry if my hands are shaky, but take a look at this. Last line on here starts with L126. That's important. So the L just has to do with where the processor was originally manufactured. This was manufactured in Intel's Malaysia plant, and so the first letter or digit, I guess, is an L, and then we have a number 1, and then we have a number 26. The number 1 that comes after the L, that's the last number in the manufacturing year. They didn't make Cedar Mill in 2001, so this is from 2011. That's right, this is a Pentium 4 that was manufactured after the launch of Sandy Bridge 2nd Gen i7s. To be honest, I didn't even know this thing existed. I didn't know they made them for that long. But the longer that you go, the better the manufacturing gets, and so this could very well be one of the best examples in the world. Now, this Gigabyte motherboard with a 965 chipset and the stock Intel cooler isn't really going to be doing us any favors, so I guess we should probably get some better cooling. And what better way to cool this thing than with a factory-sealed Zalman CNPS 9500A. This is the final one that was ever in stock at my local Micro Center, and I bought it about 5 years ago and just kept it in the box. I guess this is as good a reason as any to unseal this thing. And yeah, this Gigabyte motherboard, it's got to go too. This thing does only support officially a 1066 bus speed, and we might need more than that for our project, huh? There, that's a little better. EVGA, how's that work? Yeah, so in my research of which motherboard I should use when I'm trying to actually push and like not just do it casually for fun, I came to find out that there are no Intel chipsets that both support the Pentium 4 processor and natively support a 1333 front-side bus speed. And that's when I realized I'm going to need to go outside of the realm of Intel. Some of the younger viewers may not understand this, but back in these days, you could get a chipset for your motherboard that wasn't from the same manufacturer as your CPU. In these days, with the Pentium 4 and with the Core 2 Duos and Quads and all of that, you had the choice of, you could get an Intel chipset, but then there were others that were made by other companies like SIS and VIA. And in this case, this is a motherboard chipset from NVIDIA. You know, believe it or not, in the mid to late 2000s, NVIDIA started making motherboard chipsets. Some of them had integrated graphics that were, you know, GeForce related, but this one doesn't. This was literally just a motherboard chipset from NVIDIA. It existed primarily to support SLI technology at the time, because that was kind of a newer thing. But this motherboard is a perfect bridge of that gap. It has the 750i chipset from NVIDIA. And that means that this supports the older Pentium 4 chips and also maxes out its official frontside bus at 1333. Now, right now, this thing has a Core 2 quad on it because that's kind of what you would have been expected to use at the time with this kind of motherboard. Nobody really would have bought this and then used a Pentium 4, really. But it's compatible, and it supports all of the overclocking features. And so I'm inserting our Pentium 4 cedar mill that was manufactured in 2011. I can't believe that thing exists. I didn't know they made them that long. And as I was starting to gather some of the other stuff for this project, I realized I don't have a Windows 10 flash drive anymore. So on my main computer in the other part of the house, I am creating a Windows 10 flash drive. And while that's going, we're going to unbox our brand new Zalman cooler. In, August of 2026, we're unboxing a brand new one. And again, this was... Oh, okay, so there's the accessories box, which I'm sure has like the mounting hardware that we're going to need. And here's our new cooler. Well, straight all those fins are. It looks really nice. Almost like it's been sitting in the box for, 15 years-ish, somewhere around there. I'll put the cooler itself to the side and take a look at my hardware here. Yeah, this is the bracket that we need to mount this on 775. This is our Fan Mate 2. So this was one of the... For people who aren't familiar with Zalman, now they make cases. But back in the 2000s, they made coolers. They were one of the quiet cooler manufacturers. And so you had, and this is really nice. Their coolers came with this, what they called a Fan Mate 2. And this was one of the signature things that it would come with. And it had this little dial on here. And you would just turn this knob to turn the fan speed up and down. And it would piggyback off of the CPU fan header on the board and then plug in to the actual controller and then to the lead for the main fan. Now, I don't think I'm going to use that part of it. I think I'm just going to have the motherboard control the speed on the fan. But yeah, I have to look at the... We got nuts, washers, clip supports, and bolts. And so that's pretty nice. They actually thought of this. If you look closely on here, it's this corner has a little bit of a cutout in the plastic, and that's because when you go to open the CPU lever, it would hit. So they actually made it go around where that would lift up. That's pretty nice, and you're supposed to line that up with where the lever would line up and go up. So I'm going to get this all kind of set up to get installed, and then we'll take a look at it. Okay, we got our retention bracket installed on the board. I can tell you right now that the installation process on this is not as smooth as some of the newer products that you get these days for CPU cooling, but at least the bracket is on now, and now we can get the cooler on it. And now we get to pop open the actual cooler itself. Absolutely gorgeous. Just take a look at this brand new Zalman cooler. Never used cold plate. Oh, love that. You can still see like the markings from the machining on the cold plate on this thing. Oh, that's so cool. Back in the day, just a little tidbit about me personally, the second PC that I ever built for myself used a Pentium 4 Prescott, and I had a Zalman cooler. It wasn't the tower kind like this that stands up off of the wasn't the tower kind that stands up. It was the kind that how does this work? It was the flower kind that sat down on the insert the Intel clip lever into the clip lever slot. Okay, so they're showing it this way. Like this. Is that right? Yeah, that is appearing to be correct. All right, we need just a little bit of thermal paste on here. And let's get this cooler installed for the first time ever. And we position it. Oh, let me, before I get it mounted, let me just get the wire so that I'll be able to actually plug that in. And then you can get that onto the center post. Yeah. Oh, this is going to be a tight fit that direction. I should probably do it the other way. Because the voltage regulator cooler is right there. Let's see if I can. These are so fidgety, man. We have it so good these days with cooler installation. We really do. All right. That's sitting. Rotate this around so I can see a bit better. And click on. Yeah, there we go. Give it the old wiggle wiggle to get it in a nice little position there. Route this around, plug it in, and there you go. We got a brand new, well, now it's not brand new anymore. It's been installed one time. CNPS 9500 AT LED. So this does have the LEDs in it. I think it's a blue LED that's built into the fan there. Yeah, let's get some RAM on here. Let's start figuring out about some overclocking settings and see what this Pentium 4 from 2011 can do. Okay, flipping the power supply to the on position. All right, I see the LEDs on the board are on. It would help if I hook up the video cable so I can actually see if this thing works. Let's take care of that real quick. I got a little ahead of myself. Hook up this monitor. And away we go. I have double F's for a postcode here. I really hope I didn't just do all of this build up to have a dead CPU come in from eBay. That would be rather unfortunate, huh? Let's do a CMOS clear. And we're going to try this again, huh? Yeah, I just have double F's on my motherboard here. That's not great. I think... Okay, now we're getting post beeps, which is related to GPU. Let me see if I can figure that out. I think the CPU just wasn't seated correctly in the socket. Okay, I fiddled with it a whole bunch more. And now it's working. So the CPU was not in the slot all the way in the socket. It also, for whatever reason, just didn't like the graphics card I was trying first time round. Frequency and voltage control. FSB to memory ratio, FSB megahertz. Okay, so we can start trying to see how far we can push this. As far as the voltages go, it is the same voltage here for the CPU core, which is 1.3125. It's the same as our other example was. I'm going to go ahead and just, in advance, I'm going to set that to 1.4. And then we're going to try right off the bat here for a 1066 front side bus. That has our memory way too fast though, so I'm gonna downclock that all the way to 533. That gives us a whole bunch of room to work with. And yeah, let's just send it, see if we can post at 4.5 gigahertz on this chip using 1.4 volts. That's a yes. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean that it's stable. You know, I will be doing some validation testing once we start getting really into where we're getting close. All right, we're going to try for 4.7. Frontside bus of 1106. I'm trying for 4.7 gigahertz. And we are posted. All right. 4.8. Frontside bus of 1130. 17 times multiplier. That puts us at 4802 megahertz. Do we post? We do not post at 4.8. We do not post at 4.8. All right, so we found the limit at 1.4 volts. Is somewhere between 4.7 and 4.8 gigahertz. We're going to do one more tenth of a volt on this chip. That's the farthest I'm willing to push this particular example, because I don't know where else I would find a Pentium 4 that was manufactured in 2011. All right, we're back in. We're back to kind of normal here. Let's loosen up some of the stuff here. First of all, 1.5 volts on our CPU. I'm going to raise our FSBIO a bit. This memory is rated for 1.8 to 1.9 volt operation at full speed, and we're not pushing that. We're also not pushing the chipset beyond its possible levels here. So we're just going to overvolt the CPU's I/O by a tenth, and we've got our voltage on the CPU itself up by a bit. Yeah. So we're going to try for, we were at what, 1100? All right, so we had it stable at 4.7. So let's get ourselves posted in here at 4.7. There we are. And for the record, our CPU temperature's at 4.7. We're sitting at like 40 degrees. So we're definitely not thermally bound here. CPU voltage is reading here at 1.45. So it's actually lower than what I dialed in by a 20th of a volt, a 0.05. Interesting. Okay. Let's see if 4.8 works with the additional voltage that I fed to the chip. We just posted at 4.79 gigahertz. We're likely going to start running into where I'm going to have to do smaller increments. Let's try 4.85. Front side bus speed 1142. 4.84 gigahertz. We have a base front side bus of 285. .9. Front side bus is 1154. 4.9 gigahertz. Successful post. 288 base level. 4.9 gigahertz. 4.95. Front side bus 1165. Successful post 4.94 gigahertz. Do we have, folks, do we have the 5 gigahertz example of Pentium 4 with only 1.5 volts? We're going to try. Fingers crossed. BIOS ROM checksum error. We got a BIOS checksum error. I am confused by that. Try one more time. 5 gigahertz. Give it to me. No, it doesn't like 5 gigahertz. It's something with the motherboard. Wow. Okay, but 4.95 gigahertz was able to post. Okay, so we have an idea of where we're going to wind up landing at, right? Somewhere in the 4.9 to 5 gigahertz range can post. We're going to run our FSB at 1067. That's 4533 megahertz. We're going to lower our CPU core voltage back down to 1.4. Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. So I actually think there might be some BIOS corruption on this board. I'm noticing advanced BIOS features is cut off with an open bracket. I think we might have a slightly corrupted BIOS on this machine. So we're going to get Windows loaded on the machine, and then I want to run a BIOS flash on this board. I'm going to go check on my Windows flash drive and see if it's ready. Okay, Windows 10 flash drive is ready. We actually got a couple of other tools on here. I got SciSoft Sandra I got Cinebench R15 on here. I got CPU Z so that we can easily see some of the specs about the CPU within Windows. And I also got the latest BIOS revision for this board from EVGA. So the play at this point, because like I said, I see that it is corrupted slightly in the BIOS. We're going to get Windows 10 loaded. And then we're going to flash the BIOS with the latest, and hopefully that overwrites all of the stuff in the BIOS and gets it back to where it should be and clears up that corruption. And then we want to start running some tests. I'm going to get some base level numbers of how this CPU performs at its base 3.4, and then we're going to start finding out how far I can push it. And for the record, as I'm going through this Windows 10 install, I do have the CPU set to like 4.53 gigahertz. It's not going to stay there when I go to flash the BIOS. I'm going to set it back to stock. We don't want to corrupt it even farther. And here's a prime example. We just got a blue screen, system service exception. Let's set this thing back to stock for at least installing Windows. And I'm not actually sure how much of this has to do with the overclock and how much just has to do with let's load optimized defaults, save and exit. How much of this might have to do with the BIOS corruption that's apparently there. Load from USB. The way this thing is currently running, trying to just load Windows 10, I feel like that's a stress test in and of itself. And I have a feeling that once we actually get into Windows and we get the BIOS flashed and we're like ready to start tweaking, that instabilities are going to be uncovered simply by virtue of trying to boot Windows 10. But we are going to do our due diligence. I'm going to try and get some benchmark scores, and we're going to do what we're supposed to for a real overclocking experiment. Well, now this is exciting. We got all the way through the setup. We're currently trying to boot. I believe we're trying to boot off of the hard drive. And yeah, this is running how you would expect. For a Pentium 4 from, you know, well, the chip came out in 2007, but this example was made in 2011. Trying to run an operating system that was built, this build of it was from 2023. We've got 2 gigs of RAM. We've got 1 core. And we're booting off of a traditional hard drive. So we'll get there eventually. All right. We're finally at the screen that says getting ready with the circle going around. Yeah. I didn't realize how painful this was going to be, but we're going to trudge through it and get there. Yeah, in hindsight, I definitely should have just loaded Windows 10 using one of my Core 2 CPUs, and then I could have swapped it back after. Okay, the getting ready screen just went away. It's been probably 45 minutes on that screen. I I don't actually remember what comes next in the Windows 10 setup. I don't know if it's going to restart and then come back up, or if it goes straight into user account creation at this point. But we're still responding, like I can still move the mouse. I am definitely getting the full Pentium 4 experience right now. And to the guy in the comments on the Pentium 4 overclocking video I did that was just a casual one, he had said something about how, you know, these Pentium 4s, the Cedar Mills, were the first ones that had all the instructions to run Windows 11, and that I should load that. And I think I'm getting enough of a really interesting experience trying to load Windows 10. This is... I've never experienced something like this before. This is wild how different this is from what I'm used to loading Windows 10 or 11. We did it! We're at the just a moment screen. Just a moment. This is a very different experience from what I expected. And yes, hindsight. I definitely could have loaded Windows on a faster device. I could have done it with a better processor and then just swapped back, but this is something else. This is so interesting to me. We just reached desktop. And man, I am glad to see this. All right. Just to put this into perspective, I know this isn't going to really make sense because, like, there were lapses in when I was recording. I'd start and stop and all that, but I just want to make sure you guys understand. I started the installation of Windows 10 on this computer at somewhere between 10 and 10:30 in the evening. It is now after midnight. That is the amount of time that has elapsed. Alright, we're going to copy the benchmarking stuff over, as well as the BIOS flash. First, though, I want to extract CPU-Z. And then I want to go ahead and run that. And yes. It's going to detect everything. And there it is, Pentium 4 651 Cedar Mill at 3.4 gigahertz. Yeah. All right. Now, for this BIOS flash, run. Create floppy. We have to use a floppy disk for this. Hold the phone. Wow. I'm gonna have to see if I have a working floppy drive. This is that's I didn't expect that. Yeah, if you've watched some of my other videos on my channel, I've mentioned this before, but the later 775 and early i-series motherboards, that's when you really get into when it started being a lot easier to flash a BIOS. There are some instances where trying to flash a BIOS in that era and earlier is way harder. And this seems to be one of those times. We're gonna do a full shutdown, And then I mentioned I was going to see if I had a floppy drive, but I actually have my GoTech floppy emulator here, courtesy of a recommendation from Phil at Phil's Computer Lab. Go check him out and give him some love. And yeah, I'm going to wait for this to do a proper shutdown. We're going to hook up our floppy emulator, and then we're going to use that to host our BIOS file for the flash. And yeah, we're back in business. We got our floppy emulator hooked up, and we got it displaying that it's on floppy 0. We're gonna let this boot back up to Windows 10, and then we're going to run the utility again. That will copy the BIOS file onto that floppy emulator. And then I believe the way that this works is there is a button combination to press at post. We'll see. It might actually also copy some startup files to get us to where we need to be. So it'll like boot off of the floppy. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, like this is real time how long this takes to just log in. I don't know whether to think that means Windows 10 got a lot more bloated than like Windows 7 or Windows XP ever did, or if this is just a sign of the lack of performance on a Pentium 4. But it's definitely an interesting one. I've never run a 64-bit operating system on a regular Pentium 4 before. This is a first for me. I was chatting with some colleagues in a Discord server for the retro web, and one of them had mentioned, you know, if you're a real masochist, if you really want to have a bad time. All right, we're writing information to the floppy. And they said if you want to really have a bad time, try running a 64-bit operating system on that single-core Pentium 4. And so I figured I have to find out what this is all about. So yeah, the version of the BIOS that is in this file is SZ1K, and the one that's on the system now is SZ1I. So we're going from I past J to K, and K is the newest, as far as I understand. I don't think EVGA ever updated this beyond that. The physical chip on the board actually says SZ1G. So it had been updated from G to I. Alright, floppy disk was successfully created. Let's restart. And I want to see if this is a bootable floppy image that's going to start the flashing process. And then if it's not, like I said, there is a button combination to press at post, which it didn't show up, but Alt F2 to enter a word flash, but we're going to wait. It does have startup files, starting Caldera Dr. DOS. Please input file name, enter. Enter? Doesn't want to do it. All right, let's do this then. I'm gonna Alt F2 instead, Message says please wait, so we're waiting. Don't turn off. We're programming. Let's go. Awesome. I'm so glad this started. Oh, I'm excited to see if this is going to fix that misspelling in the BIOS, because if it does, then that means that there was some corruption that got solved by doing this. Verifying. We verified. Oh, it's going to keep going. Yeah, so this BIOS has a date of August 12th, 2008. The version that was on here was from May, I want to say. And I think it was May of 08. But it might have been earlier. Okay. That might have been successful. Yes, we have the right number here. Let's go in the BIOS. Oh, it's still misspelled here. Advanced BIOS FEA open bracket. Okay. Well, at least yeah, in our, can I like manually make this like lower? That's a little bit more. Oh, we're gonna need to remove our flash drive there. Alright. Newest BIOS is installed. God, that makes me so happy that that worked. Now we can start getting some base level performance numbers of what the benchmarks look like on stock speed for this CPU. Okay guys, we're set up for Cinebench R15. We're running it right now. I'm a little bit scared to find out what the final score is going to be, considering the lowest CPU that they show as a comparison point is a dual-core hyper-threaded i5 Ivy Bridge laptop chip at 1.7 getting 214. So I wonder if we're going to get above 20. We'll see what we get. Okay, we just finished up our run of R15 and our base level score is 49 points. Alright, we're back in the BIOS now. I'm setting this to 1.4 volts for the CPU, and then we're going to run at 4 gigahertz, and we're going to get some numbers for what that would look like. Okay, our test finished up at 4 gigahertz. We scored 58, up from 49. Almost like linear increasing here, because we increased from 3.4 to 4 gigahertz. That's somewhere around 15 to 20% increase in clock speed, and we increased just about a little under 20% in score. So now we're gonna see how far we can really push this thing. And yeah, now we kind of have established that 4 gigahertz was not an issue for Cedar Mill whatsoever. What we just did is I was running this with a voltage set in the BIOS of 1.4, but it actually delivers more like 1.35 when I have it set to that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set it to the highest voltage that I feel comfortable delivering to the CPU. I feel like 1.5 being delivered to the CPU is not going to do any long-term damage. But in order to get 1.5 to the CPU, I have to set it at 1.55. So that's what we're going to set it to. And then I'm going to set the bus to 1333, and we're going to see how we run. Now, when I said 1333, I meant 1066. I said the wrong thing, but we are going to try for 4.53 gigahertz here with that 4.54 with that roughly 1.5 volts being fed into the CPU. Okay, we have just finished up at 4.54 gigahertz, a successful Cinebench run with a score of 66. So we went from 49 at stock speeds 3.4, then we got 58 points at 4 gigahertz. Now we have 66 points at 4.54. I'm going to play with some more BIOS settings, and I want to kind of push this towards the limit of what we're able to get at post, dial it back a couple notches, and then see if we can't get a successful Cinebench. So 4.89 does not allow me to get into Windows, so we're going to have to dial this back a little bit. And this is with the FSB at a effective 1154. So we're going to dial back from 4.9 to 4.8. FSB is going to be effective 1130. That's looking a little more promising. I'm going to go back and forth here a few times. I'm going to see what's the fastest that lets me get into Windows, and I'm going to dial it back by a couple notches and run a Cinebench. Okay, so after going back and forth a few times, what I've gotten here as kind of pushing the limits of what my chip can do. We are currently at 4,772 megahertz. It is running with the voltage set to 1.55. It is delivering 1.52. So we are just under 0.2 of a volt over the max for this chip style, which that's like pushing the limits of what I'm comfortable with putting into this chip and hoping that it's not going to have any kind of long-term effects. But yeah, we're currently running through Cinebench. We'll see if this is successful, and if so, then we'll get a score. There is one additional final test that I'm going to do after this, which is this is going to be kind of a hilarious comparison. So we have this Pentium 4 that I am like pushing to its absolute top limit. And then I'm going to compare it against a Celeron 450. So Celeron 450 is a Core 2 based product. It only has a single core. It only has 512 kilobytes of level 2 cache compared to the 2 megs on the Pentium 4. And the clock speed on that Celeron is only 2.2 gigahertz. I want to run that through just stock settings on Cinebench and want to see where it lands. Compared that to our results that we got with the Pentium 4, and maybe this will give us a better picture of why Intel was giving up on NetBurst. Okay, we just finished up the test successfully. 4,772 megahertz. our score came out at 70. So now we're going to swap over to that Celeron. Besides the other things that I mentioned about it having the low clock speed, it is on the newer architecture, but lower clock speed, only 512K of L2. The other thing I mentioned about it is no hyperthreading. So let's, I'm going to go back to the BIOS. I'm going to set defaults, save, exit, shut it down, swap CPUs, and then rerun this. Alright, here we got our super high-end 2.2 gigahertz Celeron 450. Alright, continue. Now let's see. I'm curious if this starts up faster to Windows, or if it's gonna feel like kind of similar-ish. Because we do have a quarter of the level 2 cache, so we're going to be hitting the RAM a whole lot more often. Yeah, this overall doesn't feel very different. Just gonna hop into Cinebench and hit play. Let it go. Okay, we just finished up with the Celeron 450 at 2.2 gigahertz. We scored a 35. Now, that sounds pretty bad, but I want you to keep in mind a couple of things with that Celeron. First of all, we've got a quarter of the L2 cache and no hyperthreading. So the fact that we came within, what is it, about 30% of the stock score of our 3.4 gigahertz Pentium 4 is actually pretty impressive. Now, since I'm going to be using this motherboard for that fake Alienware looking case, I decided to go ahead and mount the CPU that I plan to use on the motherboard after I'm done with my testing. I might as well do a little more testing with it. It is a Core 2 quad. So I clocked it to 3.4 gigahertz with just a single core, ran through Cinebench, and the score was 87. So what that's telling me, first of all, this has no hyperthreading. Single core at 3.4 is able to beat the highest score we were able to attain at 4.77 gigahertz on the Pentium 4. So it's obvious this is why Intel was abandoning NetBurst, is simply because their performance was just not there. Even with, you know, a large amount of L2 cache on the chip, it was just inefficient, and they were running into a wall of what it could actually do. And yeah, the fact that clock for clock, you go from 49 points on a Pentium 4 to 87 on the Core 2 quad. And that's even when you're losing hyperthreading with the one core. Absolutely wild. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight as I went down this rabbit hole and this escapade into pushing Pentium 4 as far as it can and finding out what really was the stable limit on these chips. If you've stuck around this long, I really do appreciate you being here for this hour-long deep dive. And yeah, pretty soon I'm going to be taking this EVGA board with this Core 2 quad that's mounted on it, and we're going to be putting it into that Alienware knockoff case. Hope that I get to see you guys in the next video soon, and take care.